All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zenful Conversations. Um, what you may not know is this is the last, this completes our Summer of Love poetry series. Maya, we began the Summer of Love with the wonderful and much needed book by James Cruz and his husband, Brad Peacock. And what was that? Love is for all of us. And that was an amazing conversation. That conversation changed me. And if you have not listened to it, I do invite you to do so. It's up on YouTube and podcast at Zenful Conversations. But today we are here to celebrate with Maya Stein. And let me go ahead and I did not pin you. Let's pin you, Maya. Let's pin. Okay. Maya Stein, incredible Maya Stein. Maya, welcome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, you were here the other day
I was here the
for
other
a
day.
workshop.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a conversation, and I like to think of this space as more of a circle, not an interview. I like it a little bit more organic in nature, and I have a few notes, but it's not necessarily scripted. My name is ZenJen Brown. Today we're welcoming Maya Stein to our studio. Maya is a fabulous writer, poet, creativity investigator, and inventive spirit. Maya is the poet laureate of Belfast, Maine, and the creator of 10 Line Tuesday, a beloved weekly poetry series now over 1,000 poems strong and more. Maya, welcome again. Welcome again
Thank
to the
you.
studio.
Thanks, ZenJen.
Um, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself or share what's on your heart and your mind right here, right now?
Um, well, what I can say, the thing that's coming to mind right now is that this afternoon I was helping a friend who is purchased a house that they're redoing. And I went over there to help out with some tile work, and I was doing some grouting on tiles that I had laid down last week. And these are, so this is like the other side of my life is sort of like, it's really important to me to like stay in my body. That poetry is something that, sort of comes out of lived experience in my mind. It's not something that sort of drifts in the ether. And so it's really important for me to kind of practice using my body every day doing for something, and to really have a relationship with like my body in space, the ground. I live right across the street from the ocean, so sort of having this orientation, um, that my body exists somewhere, it's doing things, it's engaging and using tools. So it's just an interesting, I ran it. The reason I say this is that I ran into somebody who on my way there, and so I just was explaining where I was going, and she said, "Oh, this is interesting. Like the life of a poet is like not what, you know, you would suspect. So this is what poetry looks like today was grouting tile." Um, so I don't know. That's just, I guess I would just offer that up, that everything feels like it's material. So even when something doesn't appear in my, doesn't like have a direct, you know, A equals A sort of relationship, I do always think that there's a relationship between everything. If you really put your attention on it in that way. So
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's the grounding is huge in my book. Huge in my book. So I want to say in the description, I said that you were going to take us behind the scenes of your revision process. Um, Share how you reshape it, how you reimagine it, until it rings true. How can you even begin to explain that in a short amount of time.
Well, it's funny. I found a poem that I had forgotten I'd written a while ago, and let me just. I think this is probably the best way I can do it. I mean, I could tell you in expository language, but I think it might be helpful to share this poem because it actually also relates to what I just said. So this is a short poem, and it's called "According to My Friend John," or "How a Contractor Inadvertently Offers Advice About Revision." These are lines that I used from a series of emails I got from my friend John, who is a contractor. So these are email lines that I've put together. According to my friend John, I can see why you like it. The foundation seems sound, but the wood siding, I would extend that lack of maintenance to the roof. A painter could provide an estimate to power wash and seal. A slab would take away that clapboard sound, not as pleasing to some. Also, given the age, determine the construction and condition of the components. You don't want to inherit a sewer replacement. Lots of trees could mean root issues, not to disparage the roots, mind you. But even at this basic format, I see the potential. So this was a conversation John and I had about a building that I was looking at years ago as a possible purchase, and I sent him a photograph and kind of gave him the basic uh, story about this building, which was built in the late 1800s. And when he wrote me back all this, kind of advice and a way of looking at this building, it wasn't just about the foundation, but it was the siding and the paint and um, you know, it was the components, the sort of sum total of the components, and also their individual integrity. I just kind of had this idea, like it just sort of like hit me, like this, he could be talking about the writing practice or the revision practice or anything where you start with a kind of a piece of raw material, and then you start looking at its shape, like in a much more close-in fashion. And some things emerge as being problematic, or some things emerge as being like, this is, gold, and we should keep this. And so but what I appreciate too in this idea of the revision practice is the tone of these emails was very friendly. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't like, I mean, there were, he's kind of pointing my attention to things like you don't want a new sewer, and, the trees could, if there's too many trees, there might be root issues. But even though even the tone of that felt sort of, like friendly and just to be aware. And so when I think about the revision practice, I think of it as not being so um, taskmastery, like it's like, what if we could look at our writing with a kind of friendly detachment and also some, well, maybe friendly detachment is the right, because the idea is friendly also. Friendly is just as important as the detachment. So, the sort of embrace of something, an appreciation of the whole, of where it came, what happened, where it came to be, what its components are, and then a kind of closer in inspection of like, is this serving the whole? Is this a distraction? Is this something that, um, you know, has been, feels familiar or feels fresh? What's the enthusiasm? What's the sort of energy of the piece? So the idea is that, a lot of things have potential, and any piece of writing, must have potential. And um, but the first thing he says, I can see why you like it. So like in some ways, like for me, this is a really crucial element of having this care for our own work. Like really believing in it, really having a fondness for what where something came from. We should care about it. It shouldn't be like, I don't care, I don't, whether or not this gets written. There should be a kind of, I think, a call, some sort of inner call, that says, tell my story, or, give this some oxygen, or, um, you know, tell me more about it. And so I want to know more about it. So this is like this kind of investigation of like starting from a place of care and interest and curiosity. And then like as you get closer in, there might be some things that start to emerge as either being important or not important. Um, so I kind of look at it as like a construction project. I mean, I do, sometimes poems come out, fully formed, and that's amazing, but totally rare. And there's usually some, and it's not always an arduous process. I mean, I'm trying not to, I don't want it to be an arduous process. And so if it starts to become arduous, I start to lose the affection part. Um, so if that's sort of a cue to say, okay, this is too, it's starting to feel like a kind of work that doesn't feel like it's coming out of desire or pleasure or care. So those are sort of signals for me to step away, that maybe it's not time yet to look at something. And every piece has a different set of instructions for us. So, something that might work for one piece may be completely upended in another piece. So I try to also remember that as I'm writing and editing and revising, that um, it's as if I'm writing as if I'm starting from scratch all the time. And so to have an, a real gentleness around that of I'm starting this, and this is its own being. And so I want to recognize that it has its own personality and its own um, voice and its own um, reason for being. So trying to stay in that space of welcome
And what about play?
and play. Yeah, well, play's important. I think sometimes it's hard to feel playful around maybe a serious, how do we feel sense of play? Maybe play is when we think of the word play, we might think of sort of fun and light. But I perhaps maybe want to focus in on the idea of play as nimbleness and flexibility, and how to be, how to stay in relationship with something with a degree of acceptance or welcome, flexibility. Like this could be, the, yeah, that something could be, it could look like something other than what we imagined it to be, and to be okay with that. So the play is really about a kind of looseness with outcome.
Mm.
And I can say that a lot of times when I'm struggling with the poem, um, I kind of like try to upend it. Like, what happens if I read it backward? Or what if like I take out all the verbs? I have this practice of like part of my revision practice might include giving myself a restriction. So, um, and that can look like, oh, this is a box I'm putting around it, but it is a kind of play because for example, writing without verbs. Um, when I lean too heavily on the verbs, I sometimes find that I'm taking my focus away from the feelings or from the witnessing or the observation or the physical details of something. So giving myself the parameter of not using, like leaving the verbs out, for example, can. um, can sort of put my attention where it really wants to be. I can share, if you'd like, a poem, a verbless poem, and just to give you an example. And I'm going to share my screen so everyone can follow along. I think it's a little easier to to read this way. So let me just share my screen.
And while you're doing that, she said that Ted Kooser has a how-to book called Poetry Home Repair Manual,
That's
Materials and
great.
Tools. And Robert Frost said poetry is play for mortal stake.
Mm. It says starting share screen will stop another's computer sound share.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. All right. So here I'm going to share this. Can everyone see that? I hope. Is
All
that
good.
big enough? I can make it a little bigger. Hold on.
I think we're okay.
All right. So, I mean, I would say the interesting discovery here for me in doing this was um, how much I could move a poem forward without using verbs to do that. So without the actions and without all the, all of the things that verbs do to kind of direct and create an itinerary. Um, so this is in a way a series of images. It's called Sum Total. 2 slices of store brand multigrain bread, 3 squares of butter, 17 syllables in Lauren's haiku about a small whale. 30 lengths of the Y pool after 90 minutes of mahjong. The 4-mile drive home. The light at 2:45 in the afternoon this far north. An hour in the dryer for a heavy load. Instructions for tonight's dinner. 375 degrees for 22 minutes. A 30-second commercial break. Grape gum, flavorless, after a dozen mastications. 10 pens in the variety pack, 1,200 inches of tape in the jumbo roll, equal to 33 and 1/3 yards. My mother's recent voicemail, 2 minutes and 51 seconds. The gravel still in my knee after 42 years. I can see reading this, it's like I can kind of see a shape of this poem. It's sort of going like this, sort of narrowing and coalescing into something really personal and intimate. And so this sort of list, it's a list poem essentially, but it really comes down to these last 2 lines in a way, because this is where I come in a way, this, I don't know that there's a me or my or I anywhere else. So this is kind of an impersonal just catalog here, and then you get through it, and then this is kind of the crucial number. This is the crucial math. My mother's recent voicemail, and the gravel still in my knee. And um, so this is an example of a poem that, kind of is narrative and kind of had a more, with the verbs, it kind of like it sort of read, in kind of an expository way. But taking out the verbs, it's like landing quietly on these little scenes and moving on, and without really explaining what one thing has to do with another, with the exception that they're all intervals of time or number, or numbers of things. So that's the sort of organizing principle. Um, so that's an example of a something that was kind of in a way an easy parameter to kind of try to I figure out where the poem, where the poem was going. Um, so
That was
that's
cool. Yeah, T said again here. She said that loves this. It has the feel of a just this instead of a is
yeah,
doing. A
yeah.
poem that is rather than does. Yeah.
Something that has occurred to me recently is how many times in a conversation I might say the word I think, um, or like there's a kind of hesitation. I think that where what if we said what if that was absent of part the conversation, I think. There's like a strange and it doesn't always work, and it's sometimes really appropriate to say I think, but um it kind of creates a pause that de values what comes next, or like sort of like a softening. It softens what comes next, because I think might, sort of like it's a bit of a tentative pause before maybe the meat of whatever the, conversation is about. Um, and so that this exercise is somewhat like that, because it does kind of land you right in the square, in the, in the center of something without the lead up. So right, I mean, there's no doing here. It just is. So I don't know, it just made me think of this, I think, or when I use the word just, I'm just, I'm just looking. I'm just wondering. Um, it has the same quality to me of taking some of the weight away, um, and some of the ownership away from that. A hedge. Yes, that's right.
Hmm.
Um,
That's pretty interesting. See, I love your thought processes, quite frankly. I really do. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Maya?
yeah, happy to
Yeah, they'll come.
hear from you too.
They'll come. Just, yeah, they're okay. Gee, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yeah, Maya, thanks for this. I really enjoyed your revision workshop. I love how you went after like the enthusiasm and the energy, how the poet feels about a particular line or section, and to kind of pay attention to that and use that as a kind of like a roadmap for revision. I was wondering if you ever read your poems aloud, either when composing them or when
Mm.
thinking about how and where to revise.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a real, like, I could have led with that, because that's really the first line of checking for me. I When I'm hearing the poem, I read the poem, I record myself. Um, Recording is really good, because then I can hear it back and see where my, where it's sometimes hard to like hear your own voice, but I think it really does help kind of isolate some of the language in a way to be able to pay attention to it differently than just reading it on a page. So yeah, absolutely. I always read something out loud, and it's often that even just by itself kind of like it takes the skin off, like when, hot chocolate with the skin of milk. It's just like you read it out loud, it's like, well, the skin's gone. And now we're looking at now the cup is like where it's supposed to be, like, or at least a version of it that feels fresh. So there's going to be stuff that will be obvious to that it just doesn't belong. It doesn't mean that it's not good, or um, but it may not belong in that poem or that piece of writing. And so, I like to kind of I have like a little, I don't know if it's a folder or like in my notes app or something. I have like little fragments all the time. And I actually, on my desk, I have a little I have a little um like a paper clip with like tiny little strips of paper in it that just have like one, might be like a phrase or a word or just a line from something where I was like, oh, I'm not quite ready to, I there's something there, but it just doesn't belong in the poem. Um, I had this conversation with someone the other day about that, that idea of killing your darlings. And, like you're supposed to like kill your darlings, or, that's what we've learned. That's what we've been taught. And I kind of, I mean, I think the idea there is about getting out of the way of attachment. It's not so much, that you should just like slash and burn and take away what you like. And it's true that sometimes the thing that you're really clinging to is the thing that is getting in the way. But I think this is more about asking is this serving the poem? It's not kind of saying, okay, like it's not like going in the closet and saying, I'm going to take out every red thing I own because I have too much red and I've just got to get rid of the red. It's just like, okay, but does this red sweater, like, I mean, it's not so much this blanket, let's get rid of everything we really are too attached to. It's asking the question like, but is there an occasion that this red sweater would really show off, would really be appropriate or really, kind of make me feel great. So it's just really more about discernment. And I think when you read things out loud, you notice you can notice very quickly. I mean, at least that first, as I said, the first sort of skin of of what's kind of sometimes it's like it's hard to read. It's something like you're catching on it when you're reading, and that's kind of to me like one of those signs. Um, so if there's anything that's you're kind of catching on, and not in a way that's comfortable or it feels like I'm intrigued. It's really more of like, oh, I want to skip over that part because it's annoying to it's annoying me, right? Something like that. So um yeah. And I think time is another really good practice of just sort of like giving yourself time to not immediately go into, and I said this last week, and not immediately go into a place of revision when something is too fresh. Like really give it a chance to breathe and settle, um, and like see, what you feel a few days away or a week away, or, sometimes it's, I've got pieces that it's like I wrote and I maybe just don't look at again. I mean, we all have, we might have journal entries or things that we're just sort of curious about, but um, not to like leap into the space of revision right away. It's like, it's not important. It's not important to do that right away. It's only important, I think, if we're asking ourselves like, um, is this, you know, is this telling me to do something else here? Is there something about this writing provoking a curiosity that I want to follow? So not everything is going to need that kind of or want that kind of attention from you. So thanks for your question. That was a long answer and response.
No, well, it's not it's because it varies so much from from poem to poem to person. I mean, there's no one size fits all, I don't think. Val here says sometimes when she wants to make a point, the writing is so full of her that the point gets lost. Can you quickly speak to that?
Yeah, it's like maybe think about sort of having a kind of top heavy relationship to the poem where we want the poem to do something. We want the poem, as you said, Val, I want to make a point. I think when we want to make a point, in some ways we've lost the sense of surprise and curiosity about the piece. We have an attachment to having it do a particular thing. And maybe that might be work for like um, an essay or, like a persuasive essay or something that is where it feels like we're writing about a thing and we want to make sure we've got all the elements in place to support the argument that we're making. I think for creative writing or, poetry or personal essay, I think when we want to make a point, we've in some maybe that's a kind of a little a warning bell. I kind of see it as a warning bell of like, well, we're in charge of the writing as opposed to the writing being in charge of us. And it's a very tricky um, relationship to sort of articulate, like to sort of say, well, this is what it looks like when the writing is in charge, but or why is that important? I think for me, when the writing is directing traffic, I'm much more and I'm sort of at the mercy of what's going on, there's a couple things, really great things that can happen. I learned something. I'm not teaching something, I'm learning something. So I'm not telling, I'm receiving. Um, I'm receiving information, and that there's something really powerful about receiving information from your own intelligence, which is the writing. The writing has its own intelligence for us. And we have to get out of the way to listen to that intelligence. And that really makes the piece stronger when we can do that. When we want to make a point, in some ways, I'm concerned, I would be concerned that um, we're losing the surprise for ourselves. We're losing the being moved in ourselves. That's maybe the sacrifice. Um, so I think it depends on what the writing is used for, with the context of that. But I'm sort of in the, I suppose, business of like wanting to learn, um, wanting to listen, sort of get out of the way, to let whatever, I mean, I'm obviously the person doing the writing, but there's sometimes when I'm in a real place of receptivity, it's like something else is doing the work and I'm just like the transcriber. And I love it when I can have that experience, because then I'm really in a kind of flow state, I suppose, if you believe in that kind of thing.
And receiving.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that when it's full of I and me, this is when we can play with it and do you or she, turn it into, see how it looks
Right.
if you put she
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the additional benefit of changing the speaker, changing the identity of the speaker, working with pronouns, or maybe changing past tense to future or present tense. There's an aliveness there that might reveal itself, but also it becomes in some ways an invitation for other people to be a part of the writing themselves, to see themselves in the writing. And so when we're fixed on the point, we're not actually necessarily um, open to receiving other people into the piece with us. So that's something to think about too, is the accessibility of a piece. I see Patty, you raised your
Yeah.
hand, Patty Joy.
I have a question and a thought I'm kind of rattling around. I was working with another poet, and what you've given me is invaluable. I mean, I'm still processing all of that. But the one thing, she teaches in New York and she's a poet. Kind of, I taught her in kindergarten, and I called her because I needed help. I felt this is before I met you. And I have poems taped all over my walls that I can go back and look at because I'm overwhelmed by all the poems, but I don't want to leave them hidden. And so do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, that's wonderful.
Okay,
How
and
wonderful to be
well, I got
wallpapered.
these little sticky things that don't take off my paint. I assured my son my paint's not coming off.
Mhm.
And I've got them stuck all over the wall. And then I could go back and look at them and read them out loud, but I'm getting more of that, even you saying I'm not crazy that if I'm reading them out loud.
No.
It's
No, I mean, look, these are artifacts. I think there's when we kind of look at them, look at our work as this is evidence that we are here. I think about this when every poem I write, everything I share, it's like, I think there's a call. There must be, I don't know if it's like cellular or, this is just, ancestral or something, but this call to make meaning and to
yes.
also share what we've observed and to
Mhm.
create community of some kind, whether it's just with another person, another reader. That could be a community that the community you need. But, to have evidence of your time here on this planet. I mean, this is like, isn't this like, isn't, I don't know. I guess that's kind of what I think. Every poem is like a kind of stone on the path that I'm laying down another stone.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I know people that know me have said, well, where's all the paintings that are usually on your wall? Well, they don't see, I think my poems are my paintings now. Now I
Right.
didn't do the paintings, it was my husband.
Yeah.
I just, and just take a section because they're in this book all locked up. And you've got, if I can open it and lay it out, then I'm maybe bringing back life to those poems.
Yes. And
But
absolutely. I'll tell you too something that I started a few years ago on my car. I have magnetic poetry tiles on my car. So I'm traveling around with hundreds of magnetic poetry tiles on my car. And so when I go to the grocery store or something, I come out and I might see like somebody working on on a line of poetry on my car. Um, and it's also just a visual thing for myself, like to know that whenever I'm driving around, I'm surrounded by words. It's
Yeah.
very similar to what you're saying. It's like
Mhm.
the keeping company with your words.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love that you do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for what you've shared.
Oh, my pleasure. My
I
pleasure.
did not know you have those on your car like that.
I do. I do. And you know, I just it's kind of like a calling card. In a weird way. It's like, and I think I'm the only person in my town that has this. So like when I drive by, oh, there's some, they kind of know this is, people know this car. They look for it.
Yeah,
And I've
yeah.
just found just there's lines on there that I don't know where they came from, and they move around, and there's a sense of, just in general, like the sense of movement is that's what it's about.
I want to touch on a couple other things and then we'll circle back to the revision and hopefully other questions. But you are such a creative and interesting person. Um, you traveled cross country and toted a typewriter on a bicycle. Is this true?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 2/3 of the way, or about half the
Give
way.
us
I
a
don't know.
little snippet of that, what
Yes.
that was all about.
So I was on the verge of turning 40. So this was in 2012. I was on the verge of turning 40. I was living in Western Massachusetts temporarily, and I was walking by downtown, and there's a store. At, I think it might still be there, but there's a store that sells typewriters, and it services typewriters. It's been there forever. And there was this turquoise typewriter in the window, and I just immediately got transported back to a time when I was about 12. When I was 12, our family lived in New Hampshire, and my father put a manual typewriter in this hallway that like was sort of in between all of our bedrooms. And he started the first lines of a short story. And every night, my sister and I would each add our lines to the story. And we did this for about 2 years. And I'm a younger sister. I mean, my sister's just a year older, but as a younger sister, I always kind of deferred to my sister for everything. And I always kind of gave her, in my mind, she was just like the creative of the more creative, more everything. And this unfolding story on the typewriter was like the first contact I had with my own creative voice that I remember, like that I really like I remember feeling like I have agency in this story. I have a role to play. I have my own ideas. I can take the story wherever I want to go when I'm at the typewriter. And so when I saw this turquoise typewriter in the window, I had this vision of bringing this experience of collaborative story making or poem making to other people. And so then it was kind of a wild, like, it was just a kind of, that was sort of it in a nutshell. And then I learned that the commercial typewriter was invented in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I did the math, and I went on Google Maps, and Milwaukee was about 1,200 miles from Amherst, Massachusetts. And I thought, okay, so how long would that take to get there? Because I thought, this is an analog machine. In order to like really stay in tune with this analog technology, I have to move by bicycle. And so the idea sort of unfolded that I would travel from Massachusetts to Milwaukee. I gave myself I said 40 days would be, I leave on my 40th birthday. I'm going to give myself 40 days to get from Milwaukee, from Massachusetts to Wisconsin. And each day I stopped, set up my typewriter. I had a little trailer behind me and with a folding table and chair. And I would stop and set up my typewriter with a prompt at the top of the page and invite whoever came. I had a little sign that said, write yourself here on a chalkboard. And so whoever I met came if they wanted and sat down at the typewriter and responded to the prompt. And I did that for 40 days until I got until I got to Milwaukee. So that was that project. And then a couple years later, I did another typewriter trip with my partner, and we went on a tandem bike from Boulder, Colorado to Wisconsin. And we helped build little free libraries, those tiny book exchanges along the way. And we brought typewriters and wrote poetry for people. They would give us a word or a phrase, and we would each write a poem for them and give it away. So it was sort of the next iteration of that project.
I'm curious,
yeah.
the back to the when you had the typewriter follow on the bicycle there. I'm curious as to like did you get a lot of people wanting to do it, or did you get a lot of stay away from the crazy lady over there?
I think there were a couple things working in my favor. For one, I was on a bicycle, and I think I don't know if it's a saying or it's like whenever you see a person on a bicycle, it's like nothing can be too terrible. Like the world can't be falling apart if someone is still riding a bicycle. I think psychologically, someone would see like me and this really playful, talk about play. I mean, this bright turquoise typewriter, a chalkboard sign. There was no selling of it. I mean, I very much did not want to like try to hawk this experience. It was like I showed up, I had a sign, and if somebody was curious, they would come to the table. And what's ironic is the people that had the hardest time writing on the typewriter were writers. I mean, it's those, because they were sort of like, I don't know what it was. It's like they wanted to say something. There was this like kind of almost like a terrible weight on their shoulders. Like I've got to say something really good and beautiful. And the people that had the most pleasure and the most sort of engagement with it were those that just were very spontaneous. It's almost like they lost track of the world. I could see it in as soon as somebody sat down and put their hands on the keyboard, it was like everything just fell away and they were totally engaged. It was wonderful to watch. It gave me so much information about just what's possible and the hunger that people have for expressing themselves also, and the desire to be part of have a sense of belonging. I mean, there was something about the intermingling of writings on the page. It was really beautiful to see, nobody needed a fresh page. They were very happy to go and kind of work from what was there, or they were very interested to read what was there. I had a different prompt every day. One of the oddest probably experiences, which totally surprised me, was when I got to Detroit. And I happened to get to Detroit on a day where the baseball team was playing. It was a home game, and there were thousands and thousands of people. I went to the stadium. I rode my bike to the stadium. I set up my typewriter, and nobody came to type. I mean, we're talking thousands of people in line, and I was like, in that situation, probably it was like, what is this woman doing here? I did talk to a couple, this couple who did, stop and ask me, but what was what was going on, and I didn't, but they didn't type. And then about 3 days later, I was in this town of Jackson, Michigan, and who was coming down the street but this same couple. And it was like, I don't know, it was just really great to kind of be like, oh, okay, so they weren't in, in Detroit, they weren't ready, but then 3 days later, and they were so excited. And so I don't know, I could say so many stories from that trip,
I
but
know, yeah.
you
I
know,
gotta cut it because I wanted to ask you about, because you just did a triathlon and you also just won. What was the cardboard boat thing? Can you
oh,
tell us about
sure. Well, the caveat is I just did one. It was a group, it was a team for the triathlon. I didn't do the whole, I just did the bike portion when it was it was a short course. So it was a 15-mile ride. It wasn't, it's, it sounds more big, it sounds harder than it really was. But when you say triathlon, it's like, I think I'm not a triathlete. The cardboard boat race was so every year we have this event in the town I live in called Harbor Fest, and they have a cardboard boat race. So you have to build a boat entirely out of cardboard, and you can only use duct tape to sort of, connect the the boards. You can't make your boat out of duct tape. You can't cover the whole boat with duct tape. The idea is there's a little, you race against other people, and there's like a little um, buoy or whatever that you have to go to and then come back. So I think I approach a lot of things in the way that I do a poem. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. I had never built a cardboard boat. And the same thing with this typewriter trip. I like to start off from a place of I don't know. I think this goes back to the idea of when you know you're going to make a particular point, or you have a vested an invested objective. Um, you might lose some of the surprise of the I don't know. And so like I don't know how to build the cardboard boat, so I just went entirely by instinct. What do I think would work? And also being total like being because I had never built one before, being open to the possibility that I might sink. So I had no illusions of being like the best cardboard boat builder the planet has ever seen. I just kind of
although
did
you
one.
did win though.
Well, I came in third.
Oh,
So
I thought
I
you
won
won.
I won my heat, and then I was in the finals, and I came in third in the finals, but I was pretty happy about my performance. And the thing is that I think because I had accepted the possibility that I might sink, I was just flabbergasted that when I didn't. It was just an amazing. So I could see the connections here with writings too, is some like when sometimes you think it's going to be terrible or hard, or there's a moment in a piece where you're just lifted out of, like, you can't believe you did that. I think we must have all had experiences in our writing in this way where you sort of, I can't believe I did that. And there's like this electric surge of a kind of holiness, or just an awe. And so coming from a place of starting from a place of I don't know is to me one of the you know ingredients that might win me a piece of awe, which is, I can't, I think I want more awe in my world.
Sure.
So um, I I wanted to say another sort of practice in revision that I have sometimes is, this is related to the restriction piece, um, or having a parameter, is where I've written something, and I have to cut it down by half, like, what if? It's like a question of like, what if this piece were cut down, were half the length? Or what if, you know, it's this idea of, you know, a sort of a superimposed parameter that, you know, nobody's like whipping me into doing this, but it's like, okay, what if this piece was cut down by half? And so that's another element of this revision, is sort of the what if. Not again, not like I must, or I've, you know, this taskmaster of the inner taskmaster of like sharpening, or, you know, the idea sometimes revision is like sharpening or making more angular a piece. But when we think about the idea of revision, again, vision, can we have another vision for this piece? You know, we might have the raw piece is, you know, 500 words, and, you know, is there a vision of this piece that could exist in less, and sharp, and it kind of naturally sharpens and hones and crafts, but without the, I don't know, without the sense of slashing and burning, which feels really aggressive and violent. Another practice I've tried is writing something, you know, I have a piece, let's say, and I make a word list of all the words that were in that piece. And this is easier to do when it's a shorter piece. And I'll write something using the same, write another thing using the same words. And maybe I can show you an example if that's all right, just to give you, it's kind of like almost like a puzzle. I'm like a big puzzle. I love jigsaw puzzles. And so this is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. So this was the original piece called Roughshod. I know about half-baked ideas. I've stayed up nights imagining the possible outcomes, then jiggering the blueprints yet again. I've looked in the mirror and given pep talks to the worry, looking back, and turned my living room into a catwalk so I could practice the stride of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. But in the end, there's that glitch in the mechanism I can never plan for, the wires frizzling in the unforecast humidity, a toggle switch that won't wake up, and the wild design I somehow managed to wrestle into street clothes drags its delinquency behind it. All the dust and none of the glory. Still, I can't help but love every rumpled foundling and the misbegotten stink at its heels. How else would I meet each dejected face at my door, then reach with my roughshod hands to hold it closer? This is, you know, ironically kind of a piece about writing poems, you know, like the origin of poems and wanting to love the poems that we write. And sometimes we can't, you know, or they're, you know, we have this criticism around our own, like, what did we just do? We have this desire for it, and maybe it won't wake up. But this instruction here to love every rumpled foundling, it's like this idea of wanting to, you know, we still need to care for what we make, even if it's not the best thing, even if it's not what we imagine for it. And then like really bring it closer and care for it even more. So I wrote this poem, and then, you know, a week later, I thought, you know, I felt like I had nothing left. I didn't have anything to say. And so I made a word list, all the words that were in this poem. And I decided to write another poem just using the word list. And so I didn't have to use all the words. I gave myself you know, permission not to use all the words, but this is a poem called The Practice. In the mirror, she's rumpled, clothes that won't meet exactly. There's a half-baked imagining, then looking closer, a frizzling love with none of the outcomes. Behind each door, blueprints toggle to roughshod ideas and back to dust again. The glitch of the practice talks. But how else would it manage the room? A plan can't face its stride, drags its dejected stink up the street. So what? Every living mechanism knows worry, and the misbegotten nights somehow end. Foundling hands wrestle, reach up, then wake, and unforecast, a wild glory turns up its heels, jiggering the catwalk into delinquency. Who can hold all the wires, given the humidity? What a strange poem. It was a weird poem that came out of this. But it's funny because I'm reading this now from a distance, and I can see this was like a call and response to my own writing work, sort of the desire for a poem to be really great, and then sort of discovering, wanting something to be great, maybe just poems and all, and anything else. And then it's not, but how do you love, can we still love something regardless of the roughshod nature of it? And this is a kind of response to that. This is the practice. This is, um, you know, this is what we have to do. Clothes, rumpled, clothes that won't meet exactly, half-baked imagining. The glitch of the practice talks, but how else would it manage the room? I don't know. I mean, it's a very odd poem, but I think there's something in there for me about, yeah, a wild glory turns up its heels somehow. Every living mechanism knows worry. So like this happens to everybody. And then out of nowhere, sometimes, a wild glory turns up its heels. So that's kind of a piece of a revision practice, which is to use something that's already there, and see what else might come out of it. It's kind of like, how to make a meal with the leftovers in your fridge. So that's something I do all the time. Try to make a meal with the leftovers. So, we don't have to like start over all the time. Sometimes just working with what there is can just get us into a language. That's the kind of what I want to say about that is getting us into the language of another way of looking. I don't think that poem that poem is a very odd poem, as I said, but I somehow like committed to it, with this sort of invitation to just really trust that there was something, I could make something out of the leftovers. And I think what arrived was like a way of putting words together that was new to me. And that was exciting to, to be in a space of, the beginner, or like to be sort of like, wow, where did this come from? That's exciting. So that's a thing. I do use a lot of, a lot of inspiration for work for my writing comes through photographs. I love to take pictures. And, so, sometimes when I'm at a loss for what to say, I think I really spend more time looking at a photograph that I've taken that maybe is in relationship with what I'm trying to say, because I might find something there visually, sort of energetically, that I can't quite articulate with language. So, I'm wondering if we could do a practice of that, actually. Would that be all right?
What do you have in mind?
So I have a list of, I have a visual of 10 photographs. And I just thought it'd be interesting to see what if each photograph could represent a line, and just to see what happens when when you see this collection of photographs, the piece that
I
might
think we could probably do it real quick. Let's give
Okay.
it a go.
Okay. And this is totally optional, but I was thinking of an activity for everybody to do. So I'm going to share this collection of 10 photographs. Oops, did I lose them? No, they're here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Or enough of it?
2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yes.
Okay. So the idea here is just to go, you can go either down or across. But just, whatever you see here. This is, I don't know if anyone used to read Highlights magazine for children, but they had this like close up of something, and then they would draw it back and tell you what it was. But this is not quite that, but I think this was the inspiration for that. So you have, you can you can look at these as they go across. Just come up with one line for each and see what happens. It's just a way of kind of, playing, dancing, whatever you want to call it, just being a little bit looser with your connections.
So type it into the chat
You can type it into the chat. You can type it on
or
your
on
own
your own paper.
and read them, however you want to do it. And you can even have something lead into the next, if it's coming to you that way. I guess when we're ready to share, if anyone wants to share.
Does anybody want to share? Well, I'll share, but I don't know if well, the light shines on the hedge by my front door. Dad's eating blueberries as the kids play with the hose. The sunset shines on the beach towel. Rope, celery, books, good night. I got lazy at the end.
That's great. You got lazy then. That's great though. I mean, just
There's
even,
Carol.
just the movement of
A
that.
porthole view of abandoned sweetness, pouring the honey of morning into a woven, colorful braid, and a garden of color descends into the night. Beautiful portal to a
Right.
green space. Beautiful. What did you write, Maya?
Let's see. I wrote, let me just share the image again now that I lost it. Well, maybe it doesn't matter. The way the light entered. A summer morning, we should have taken our bicycles. At the dock, a nest of ropes, like a tarot card or a dead end. We swam anyway, our hands finding the bottom, missing the seaweed. Later, we would remember how it felt like our lives would never end. No. It's just, I think the nature of that exercise is to just bring some breath into our writing, sort of create a little more air between things. I think sometimes we can be so fixated on getting to the end that we've kind of we're not experiencing the middle that much. And
I love it.
so I think whenever possible to have this, to be able to slow down a bit and to have some space in our writing, not just when we're reading. I think that's a really great cue as to sort of where more space could happen, but also so that other people could enter that space. Others can enter that space and be in that kind of ether with us.
Let me ask anybody if they have any questions before we of Maya before. Darlene, go ahead.
Love this. I just love this tonight, Maya. Thank you so much. I'm going away with these words: compilation, connection, explosion, coming alive, writing intelligence, poetry, directing the traffic. So, just so good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darlene.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
And I wrote about the blueberries and the sunset.
Yeah, I think
Anybody
that we are always lit up by visual things. We respond just to color, to texture, to shapes. So yeah, part of this is noticing it as it relates to revision also is sort of like, are we, to be able to sort of land on things or tangibles can help really ground our work. So if we're too in the space of thinking or ideating or hypothesizing, it's really hard to get to the to put our handhold on our writing. So just that's something, I think this is a good exercise for that, of just sort of reminding ourselves like, oh, we actually are, we come alive when we are encountering things, color, wind, the smell of, gardenias, whatever it is. So
I know. What's the one thing you hope every person takes from this conversation, Maya?
I would say that the writing knows what to do. The writing that you are putting on paper knows knows what it wants to do, knows what it wants to be, and to trust that, to trust what it's doing, trust what it's telling you to do. Even if what is happening is scary and weird and doesn't sound like you, or there, just to be aware that there's like a, you're an iceberg. You've got 1/10 is what you know about what you're writing, and the writing has like the 9/10 of a lot of that. What else is there is living under the surface, and so it's really great to know, to be in a place of receptivity and trust that the writing knows what it wants to do, and we just have to try to get out of the way enough and follow the lead of our own intelligence.
Very good. Website is mayastein.com. Maya Stein, Stein, correct, .com. Facebook, Maya Rachel Stein. She happens to have a 7-day prompt offering that's going on right now. Today's day number 1. Now we have a few other offerings coming up too, right? If they go to your website, can they connect to you, get on your mailing list or something?
Yeah, they can. There's a drop down for the classes that are upcoming. And yeah, you can get on my mailing list and get a poem every week in your inbox for free.
Well, and then they can hear about whatever offerings you have coming up as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And Maya, thank you. Everyone, thank you
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much. If you haven't heard, I'm putting together a book. Well, it's an ebook. It's a pamphlet. It's a PDF, but it's Poems of Peace. So if you haven't heard that, I'm asking for submissions for a poem of peace to give freely. You can find out more about that and all of the other free offerings at zenfulconversations.com. But thank you guys so much for coming and for supporting these offerings. Maya, I really appreciate all the love you've given everybody over the past week or so. I just appreciate it so much.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
soon.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Namaste.
Good night.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.